This SMG interview is presented by Bobcaygeon Brewing Company.
Here with Ashley Docking. Give it up for Ashley Docking, by the way. We have a bit of a studio audience, right? Look at that.
Hello.
Not bad, right?
Hello.
We're going to hit the big time eventually.
That was a track. You just press play.
That's
fine.
right. If that was a track, that was a pretty weak track.
Yeah,
We got to get a louder one.
You don't want to overcompensate.
That's true. Good point. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to talk to you. You've worked at a number of stations. You've hosted a lot of engaging segments over your career. Kind of give us an overview of where you've worked and how your career has progressed over the last 4 or 5 years.
Sure. So when I first graduated school, I moved out west, like a lot of people
To Edmonton.
have to. I moved to Edmonton,
Yes.
yeah. And I worked for Breakfast Television there as a PA. And then it turned into an on-air part-time anchor role just because everyone was so short-staffed, so you kind of get the opportunity to wear a lot of different hats. I worked for the Oilers as well, and then I moved back to Toronto and got a job at the Fantasy Sports Network.
Right.
And then I worked for the NBA D-League team Raptors 905 as their sideline reporter. And then I got a job after that at CHCH in Hamilton. And I just sound like I'm so full. And then. But I moved around a lot because I think we know in this industry that there's a lot of short-term stuff, there's a lot of contract stuff.
That's
so
right.
You kind of have to keep it moving and go where the work is.
Yes. What did you learn in Edmonton? Because I moved to Winnipeg, so we both moved west for
Yeah.
jobs, right? So it takes a lot of guts to do something like that. Not to pat myself on the back or to pat you on the back.
That's okay, this is what we're here for. It's just like you talking
Yeah,
about
but it does. Like not everyone
Yeah.
can do that, right?
No, and it was my first time being away from home, as crazy as that sounds.
Same with me.
When I first graduated school, I got a real grown-up job, as they say, and I was saving to buy a place, but I hated my career. I was turning into that person who, if you're like, oh, how was your day? Oh, let me tell you about Jane in Cubicle B4. She's the worst. Like, I had a soggy
hate
sandwich
Jane.
for lunch. Jane's the worst. But you know what I mean? I was complaining about everything, and no one wants to be around those people.
No.
People like to be around others who are happy and engaged and, you know, living their best kind of life.
Right.
But I wasn't doing that. So I went back to school. Was lucky enough that I was still with my parents, so I didn't have to worry about a full-time job, worry about rent and all that grown-up stuff.
Right.
And then, yeah, so when I left, I didn't know anyone.
Yes.
Not even one person.
And now working in television, you do actually like the people because it's kind of your mojo, right? The same type of interests.
Yep.
So what do you like most about what you do? What puts a smile on your face? What satisfies you the most about your job?
The diversity is nice. So I have about 3 or 4 different things that I do right now, so it doesn't get mundane, it's not
Right.
static. And sports in general is like that anyway, because every game is different. The storylines change from day to day, week to week. So that's something that I really enjoy. And then you're right, the people are great, a lot of common interests and a lot of extroverts, a lot of funny people. And it's kind of nice to be around like-minded people who are really driven, I find.
Yes.
Driven, motivated, and not worried about kind of taking a step back because they're always able to bounce back,
Right.
which is nice.
Where do you get your drive? Because as we were talking about a few minutes ago, the industry is very shaky. I don't think anyone should get too comfortable at their jobs because you never know, it could change like that, right? So through all that kind of uncertainty and that mess, how do you kind of stay focused? Where do you get your drive from or your work ethic?
Sounded like a big threat. No one get too comfortable.
I'm the
Directly
least
into the
person to be
lens,
talking about
do
that.
not
Yeah.
get too comfortable. I think that my drive just comes from my athletic background. I like to be successful, as I don't think you could talk to anyone and be like, I love failing. It's just the best. Like, you do learn lessons from failing. However, I do like to put my best foot forward, and I like to try my hardest, and I like to leave a good impression on people that I meet and deal with. So I think if that's the basis of everything that you do, you're going to kind of put your best foot forward because you don't want to show a shaky version of yourself. No one's perfect all the time, of course. Like, everyone gets hangry and wants to yell at someone, but you can't just walk into a situation and be like that all the time. So I think that just wanting to do your personal best just kind of fits into that.
Yeah. The girl who gets angry and doesn't like to be successful, Jane from Cubicle B.
Jane's the
Can you believe
worst.
that?
Just give her a Snickers
What are the
already or
odds?
fire her or something.
That's right. Now, you're a big basketball fan.
Yeah.
So talk to us about Hoop Talks.
Yes.
Tell us what these events are and what happens there.
Hoop Talks are amazing. So it's not just basketball. They do pitch talks as well. They
Yes.
do puck talks as well. So depending on what the sport is. And the premise is I get to talk to experts in the industry, guys like Doug Smith, for example, Sherman Hamilton, Paul Jones, all those guys who have been around the game forever. And then like younger writers, Blake Murphy, Eric Kareen, Holly McKenzie, Keila Gray, and you get to kind of hear the uncensored version.
Right.
They write articles, they do podcasts, but there's a certain language, tone that they might not use. But if you come to one of these Hoop Talks events, for example, they let go a little bit.
Yeah.
People have a few beers,
So it's
get
in
a little
bar,
loose lipped.
It's a panel discussion.
And then there's a Q&A with the audience. So you can ask whatever you want, nothing's off limits.
That's
and
great.
sometimes it gets a bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but that's sometimes the best content is when it's unexpected.
Are you seeing like the popularity of these growing and growing?
Yeah, I think so. We have a really good panel coming up with 2 of the starters, so it should be exciting. I think people like it because content is interesting now, right? Like you can get it immediately on Twitter.
Right.
You can get takes from people whose opinions that you either really agree with or really disagree with, but that live interaction, that face-to-face communication is something that's dying. Like when was the last time you got a phone call that you wanted to answer?
Well, Taylor called me earlier and I didn't want to get that, so we won't count that. But yeah, you're right. It's not as common.
That interaction is gone, right? There's always a screen in front of you. So I think that that's the special thing about Hoop Talks is that you bring people back together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Throughout all your gigs, you must have realized that networking was integral to getting some of these jobs. And so when did you find out that meeting people and meeting the right people was integral to success?
So I think that I have a different perspective on networking than a lot of people because you said meet the right people. And it is important to know decision makers, but I also think that if you just target in on decision makers all the time and that's all you do, you're not necessarily perceived in the right way.
Totally.
It's important to be hungry, it's important to be driven, it's important to go out on a limb and talk to people that are going to be making decisions, but you also have to know your colleagues and your peers. And I think that when those relationships are good and strong, that information is passed along. And I think that that is more important than just sending an email to the head of a station and being like, I want to work for you. Well, who do they know that you know? And what are they going to say about you?
Right. It's that personal touch.
Yeah.
That's who you are. Absolutely.